The Philippines is said to be one of the fastest growing economies in Asia, with about 270 stocks listed on the Philippine stock market and only 30 stocks in the Philippine Stock Exchange Index, or PSEI. The Philippine stock market continues to remain at an attractive level for local and foreign investors. Global Strategy Real Estate keeps you updated with the latest information on the Philippine stock market to prove you just that. In collaboration with AB Capital Securities Inc., Global Strategy Real Estate presents to you the weekly stock market wrap-up, posting every Friday of every week.
Welcome back to the weekly stock market wrap-up with AB Capital Securities Inc. Today we have Mr. Lance to give us this week's stock market report.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lance, and I'm here to give you this week's market wrap. So first off, for the U.S. markets, investors continue to await stimulus package, and that's why there's really been negative sentiment for the major U.S. indices for this week. And in addition, there's renewed lockdown in Europe, and that's why we've seen steep declines in some of the airline shares for this week as well. And for the Philippines, some economic news. First, bank deposits grew 12.4% to 11.2 trillion for the first half of 2020. So the Philippine banking sector saw a double-digit deposit growth despite the series of rate cuts done by the BSP to try and stimulate or to try and encourage spending. So we think that just goes to show that fiscal stimulus is the more effective tool in stimulating or supporting the Philippine economy amidst the pandemic, since consumer sentiment to spend won't likely change unless we see a clear end to this pandemic. And third, POGO exodus, or second, the BSP may remain accommodative for at least 2 years. Just like the Fed has announced that they will likely keep an accommodative policy stance until at least 2023. The BSP has also hinted that they're likely to keep a low interest rate environment for at least 2022. And we think that is a good move from the central bank, since once the Philippines is on its way to recovery, we think that a low interest rate environment will really help boost spending. Third, POGO exodus take a hit on POGO-centric areas. So this is bad for the Metro Manila property sector, since POGOs for the second half or for the second quarter of this year, POGOs accounted for about 11% of the total office leasable area here in Metro Manila. So that's definitely gonna take a hit. And fourth, all flagship infra projects moving forward. So the 104 infra projects under the government is already either under construction or will be under construction by next year. Next, debt to GDP to rise to 53.9% in 2020 and 58.1% in 2021. So as I've mentioned, fiscal stimulus is really needed as of this moment, since private consumption is really declining, and government or fiscal stimulus is what's really gonna keep the economy afloat for now. And on top of that, it's still so far of the 70% all-time high debt to GDP of the Philippines. So again, we're in this unprecedented times, and the government will really need to step up its spending despite the lower revenue collections to try and limit the economic impact or the negative economic impact brought about by this coronavirus. And finally, revenue index slumps to record low in 2Q 2020. And this one is not surprising, since when the enhanced community quarantine was implemented in the second quarter, a lot of businesses were really shut down. And yeah, some corporate news, Dito telecommunity rollout on track. So far, Dito has about 860 towers right now, and that's already more than 50% of the required towers if you want to cover 37% of the total Philippine population, which is Dito's target come launch time. And in addition to that, Dito is also preparing for the user test by the fourth quarter of this year, and for their commercial launch, they're still targeting to have that by March of next year. Second, Now Telecom Eyes public listing, 5G rollout as NTC grants provisional authority to fourth telco. So recall that the NTC has extended the provisional authority of Now Telecom to maintain, operate, and install mobile telco system. And the provisional authority, however, is subject to an additional capital infusion of 1.9 billion pesos. And to comply to that, Now Telecom looks to list in the Philippine Stock Exchange by way of introduction. So for you guys who aren't familiar with listing by way of introduction, it's basically it does not go through the lengthy process required for an initial public offering or an IPO. So for listing by way of introduction, the company's stocks will already be listed in the exchange and be ready for trading. And finally, Merrimart signs pact with Food Panda Philippines for dark store concept. So this is Merrimart's way to adapt to the new normal. Basically, a dark store concept. There's no physical store that the customers can go into. So the dark store is mainly for its online or for Merrimart's online customers. So Merrimart looks to build 2 dark stores by next month. So for the local market, on a week-on-week basis, we're down 54 points and we're back at the 5,800 level. So for this week, we've seen weakening sentiment from investors. We're seeing thin volume. For this week, it averaged just around 4.5 billion pesos. And we expect that in the coming weeks as well, in the absence of positive catalysts. And on a year-to-date basis, net outflows is already at 98 billion pesos. And we really expect this trend to continue moving forward. We don't expect significant net foreign buying to prevail for a long period of time since, or unless we see the Philippines show signs that we're on our way to a sustainable economic recovery, and until we see the Philippines go out or come out of the recession as well. And for the regional markets performance, the Philippines continue to be one of the worst performing markets in the region, and that's because the Philippines continues to have one of the highest number of active cases, and the Philippine economy is one of the hardest hit economies by the pandemic as well. And for the year-to-date currency performance, the Philippines continue to outperform versus its regional peers. And that is on the back of, again, strong OFW remittances, and as well as the weak import bill by the Philippines. And for our market outlook, we expect the market to continue range trading with a downward bias, as I've mentioned, because we don't see or expect any significant catalyst to drive the market in the near term. So some key events for the coming week: PH Manufacturing PMI and the BSP meeting will be on October 1. And we're looking at an immediate resistance of 6,000 and a major support level at 5,700. And again, these are our stock picks for the third quarter. The companies that are highlighted in red are the companies that will experience pressure in their earnings as long as the pandemic is ongoing. And the companies that are highlighted in green are the companies that have relatively resilient earnings despite the pandemic. So these are Bagger picks performance. So as you can see now, and Dito, our telco picks are really outperforming so far because of the news stated a while ago. And that's it for this week's market wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for today's weekly stock market wrap, Mr. Lance. Now for our follow-up questions. What are your stock predictions for next week?
Well, we still like our bagger picks. As you can see, now and Dito are really outperforming so far. And that's just primarily news driven. And those developments still hasn't translated to significant earnings increases for those companies. But despite that, those companies are already under the radar of the investors. We're seeing a lot of traction for those stocks right now. And just like what we've said before, those bagger picks, those companies have strong growth prospects. They have good growth potentials, good expansion plans, and we think that once they successfully roll out their projects, just like what we're seeing right now for Dito and Now, we think that our bagger picks will definitely gain gain a lot more traction by that time.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Lance. And that ends our weekly wrap-up with AB Capital Securities Inc. See you again next week.
Follow us on our social media accounts, and for more videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.